One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 5 of Amazon Prime's The Peripheral, entitled What About Bob? And, you know, what about Bob indeed? While I did find this episode enjoyable, I thought it was probably the least of the 5 we've seen so far because, the decision to essentially pause virtually all of the other storylines and information to have an episode that almost entirely focuses on yet another attempt to kill Flynn and Burton is just a bewildering decision to me. I don't mind it, but it's like, okay, so we had the first attempt, which resulted in still the best action sequence of this series so far, the beginning of episode 2, with the military guys and the invisible trucks that came up on Flynn and Burton's property at the end of episode 1 and start episode 2. That was the first attempt. The second attempt was almost identical to this one, except the attempt doesn't happen. But it's the when they attempt to pay Corbell Pickett to do the job himself. And they make him the same offer they made Bob, the $10 million, here's $2.5 up front. The exact same thing, right? But then, since he got paid off, now it's like, okay, now we're going to move to Bob. It's like, okay, now we're doing too much here. This is now the third time. You need to find a different, if you're not going to find a way to physically come there and do it yourself, which would involve probably literal time travel, which they made it clear that's not what this is. But this constant now we're going to hire the next guy. Now we're going to hire the next guy is already getting kind of tedious when you're on the third try of hiring someone. You need to switch it up and do something different. But then this time they spend almost the entire episode on Bob. And with only an 8-episode season, I believe, leaving us with 3 left, it's strange to spend most of this episode focused on Bob, which again, Bob himself is an interesting character. I don't mind that. And it seems like Bob's going to hang around and I'm cool with that. But it just seems weird to all the interesting things that we learned in episode 4 to put a pause on all of those things, to spend all this time on a very, very basic, here's the new guy that we want to kill Flynn and Burton. And it's I don't know, man. I feel like we deserved a lot more here. And I think this is part of the reason why, even though I thoroughly enjoy this show, it's not going to make my top 10 or anything like that, because there's little unforced errors that I think this show makes that a better show wouldn't make. And I think this is one of them, having this again, now we're going to pay this guy. Now we're going to pay this guy. Now we're going to, okay, we get it. Try something else now. But, like I said, the title here revolves around this guy, Bob. His name's Bob the Butcher O'Connell. And Robot Daniel hires him to kill Flynn and Burton. And we spend a lot of this episode learning a little bit about Bob as a person, and then also dealing with Bob trying to pull off this kill. But before we get to that aspect, the episode opens a year prior to Alita's disappearance. And over the course of a few scenes, I think it's maybe 3 scenes or so that take place before they do the opening theme and whatnot, we learned that Grace, who is the woman that Charisse killed maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago, I think it was episode 3 with the bees or whatever. In that episode, we learned that Charisse had reason to believe that Grace said something to Alita that prompted Alita to steal whatever it is that Alita stole, to do whatever it is that Alita did. And I think it was presented to Charisse as oh, this Grace person was her they were roommates. Well, we learned in this episode that they were a much sexier version of roommates. It wasn't that simple. It was a little bit sexier than that. And that Grace did in fact assist Alita, just kind of unbeknownst to her, I think. I think that she didn't realize what was going on, and she let her, the fact that she was enamored with Alita at this time, allow her to make some very questionable decisions. But they meet up, and Grace tells her that she's now married to a man, and she has 2 kids. And then there's this weird kind of I think this is the first thing that kind of made me raise my eyebrow at this episode, which sucks, because it was the second scene. But there's this weird kind of like playful banter that happens between the two of them that just felt tonally weird for both this show and this episode. Like it almost felt kind of sitcom-y almost, like this little banter they had at the beginning, and it just didn't really fit the tone of the scene or the show for me. It was brief and inconsequential, so it's not a huge deal or anything like that. I just thought it was a little bit odd. It stood out to me. Also of note in these scenes, we learned that Alita had she had a thing for dollhouses. Like apparently they were kind of like a safety blanket for her of sorts. And it makes me wonder about that 3D model of Flynn and Burton's property that we saw in Alita's little surgery room where she did the eyeball swap. It makes me wonder if, like, my interpretation was that was almost kind of like reconnaissance, almost like they do on Game of Thrones, how they'll have like these not boards, but like they'll have a table with pieces or tables that look like the land, and they use it to plot and strategize. I looked at it as kind of like surveillance, like reconnaissance. Like, okay, if I'm gonna plan something, I need to have this model here. But now it makes me wonder if, for her, that is like a dollhouse. It did appear to be 3D printed, which we know is a thing that's connected to Flynn. And it makes me wonder if that house holds some sort of significance for Alita. Like, is Alita, I don't know if the timelines work out, but is like Alita the child of Flynn and someone else, or Burton and someone else? Please don't let Alita be the child of of Flynn and Wilf or something like that. That wouldn't work out. I think she'd have to be like my complexion for that to work out. But what a mind fuck it would be if Alita was the child of Flynn and Wilf. Like, whoa. But I wonder if that's the case, though, if that house has some sort of special significance to Alita. And the most important takeaway from this small collection of scenes here is right before the opening credits, we learned that the eyeball that Alita had Flynn in Burton's Peripheral acquire. Well, she didn't acquire the eyeball, she acquired the person. But the eyeball was not just an arbitrary, I need any eyeball that has access to this room. Nope. This woman, Muriel, was specifically chosen to have that eyeball stolen. She earned that eyeball steal by being a incredibly entitled, smart mouth piece of shit. And like, where do you get off talking to somebody like that? Like, just, and when she is accompanied by someone who is at the very least your peer, if not your superior, and you gonna talk to her like that? I'm so glad that, even though I thought the scene was a little bit corny, I was glad that it was a nice callback, I think, to me, to the eyeball thing, and to be like, and to notify us that this was not just an arbitrary eyeball. This was someone who did something to earn having that eyeball taken. I thought that was kind of cool. Let's see. Oh, so we also see the full extent of what can happen in that room, the room that you need an eyeball to access. Grace takes Alita in there, and we learn that they have, I think she said like 8,000 stubs that they can like utilize and monitor in concert with like the military and shit like that. And she mentions haptics, and there's like a moment where we see like a group of soldiers, and there's like a dog that they know is a trap, and she says something like they altered like these people's compassion in their haptics or something, and like it made them run out to save the dog even though they knew it was a trap. And when she meant, like, so we got the word haptics is dropped here, military is dropped here, and it just makes me wonder if, well, I don't feel like wonder. I mean, I feel like we're supposed to take away from this that whatever it is that Future London is doing with haptics and experimentation and stubs back in Flynn and Burton's time, that Burton's time in the military, like the military essentially served up Burton and his people as test subjects for these haptics. And then it also makes me wonder if, just like they were able to alter the compassion, like move the compassion slider up on these soldiers in this, and we're looking at in this scene, if they also have the ability to do that, if someone has the ability to do that with Burton, and maybe can alter Burton's actions, and we just don't know it yet. If so, Burton on the other team would be a really interesting set of circumstances that I think would be pretty enjoyable. But so we get the opening credits, and then after that, this is when we're introduced to this guy, Bob the Butcher O'Connell. He gets, like I said, he gets the same offer that Corbell Pickett got, 10 mil, 2.5 up front, but as a little bit of a cherry incentive on top, he gets a nice threat to his daughter's life with replete with like a description of where she lives or something to that effect. And he also in the mail gets the sonic boom hand cannon. I like to call it the sonic boom because it makes me think of Street Fighter. And gets the sonic boom hand cannon that we saw used on Flynn in Burton's Peripheral in Future London in like the first episode. So he gets one of those in the mail. He agrees, but first he has to handle this dude, Frank, who apparently is the guy that gave Robot Daniel. Robot Daniel is the person who makes this offer to Bob. Frank is the guy who gave, I guess, Robot Daniel the information about his Bob's daughter and whatnot. So Bob goes to this bowling alley, and this guy, Frank, I forget his last name. He's played by the same actor who played the Blackfish on Game of Thrones. He's the guy who apparently gave Daniel this info, and Bob kills Frank and his family with astonishing ease. So that let us know right there that whenever Bob decides he's going to go after Burton and Flynn, this isn't going to be an easy, like, this is just a guy who's good at his job. Like, this is a guy who gets his guy every time kind of deal. But before I continue with Bob, I want to take a brief intermission here, and I want to talk about Billy Ann, because, you know, Bob starts his mission to kill Flynn and Burton, or tend to be stalled on the side of the road where presumably they were going to drive by it, which is what happens. But, you know, in that scene, I'm like, okay, I'm guessing this is where he is expecting Flynn and Burton to drive by on this road across this bridge. And so if you recall, I want to say it was probably in my video for the first 2 episodes, I said up front that I just did not trust Billy Ann. Like I said, like, you know, nothing popped off until Flynn told Billy Ann what she saw when she went into what she thought at the time was a simulation. And she presented the idea like, oh, I wonder if I'm actually in a body in a different place. And then that's when everything popped off. And I said in the video, like, I wondered if Billy Ann was kind of like a stub, and that they were, I don't know, I probably didn't use that term, but I said something like essentially someone that Charisse or someone from Future London was kind of using like as a mole, like to get information. So in this episode, Billy Ann drives by Bob and offers to help fix his stalled car. Then she starts to leave and comes back, and she's incredibly insistent on helping this guy all the way, and she's insistent all the way up until Flynn and Burton actually do drive up, and it just made me wonder, like, it felt like, oh, I don't know, like she knew that's what he was there for. And now, now that changes in the fact that I don't think, like, Charisse could be using Billy Ann for information, because then Billy Ann would have no reason to stop Bob, because they would have the same purpose. Unless, of course, that's where Billy Ann draws the line, is fucking with Flynn. But I do still think Billy Ann knew what he was there for. Like, she knew something was up. Like, Billy Ann just ain't a regular person living here. There's something going on with Billy Ann, and I think we get more evidence of that in this episode. But back to Bob. I expected, after the way the opening of episode 2 was with the invisible truck guys and their attack on Flynn and Burton's property, I expected, I'm like, okay, whenever Bob decides he's going to go after Burton and Flynn, it's going to be fucking sick, right? And I had no idea how those two would handle someone who was able to dispatch, what was that, like 4 or 5 guys in this bowling alley as easily as he did. But unfortunately, I didn't even get to fucking find out, because that scene was a bit disappointing. Like, I don't know about you guys, and maybe it's my fault for being hyped up for it, but I'm thinking like, okay, this guy's going after Flynn and Burton, this should be sick. And then Flynn spots the sonic boom hand cannon. They get out of the way. Burton shoots him a couple of times. He doesn't go down. Billy Ann shoots him a couple of times with a shotgun, and that's it. And I'm like, well, that was kind of anticlimactic. I was expecting something a little bit more exciting than that. And then Tommy shows up and arrests the guy, and he's like, yeah, he had on a vest. I'm like, what is this vest made out of? Vibranium? Like, how do you get hit with multiple shots to the body from a handgun? Okay. But then a couple of shots to the body from a shotgun, and he just, like, seemed fine. Like, he didn't, like, normally they'll be like, they'll be shocked from, like, the impact of it or something. And he's just, like, getting up and continuing to do what he does. And I now also wonder, is Bob, like, I feel like Bob can't be a regular person. Like, is there something up with him too? Like, the way he killed the guys in the bowling alley, I feel like a vest shouldn't have been enough to protect him like that. I don't know. I'm wondering about Bob. Bob's clearly going to be hanging around, so I think it's interesting to see what's going to happen with Bob in the future. But if Bob is just a regular fucking human, I'm gonna have an abundance of side eye for how many shots he took and was okay to get. I'm like, this is the motherfucker's the fucking Terminator, man. So Tommy shows up and he arrests Bob. And then he has this long, drawn-out conversation with Flynn that's like this very, very thinly veiled request for like the umpteenth time to tell him the truth. Like, you can be honest with me. I'm your boy. Lean your head on my shoulder. I promise I'm not going to like push it down below. Like, I swear, like, it's all good. Just let me help you. Help me help you. And she's like, nah. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm kind of sick of this too. Like, just like, like, okay, I've had enough with... Okay, now we're going to pay the next guy $10 million to go after Flynn. Okay, do something different. Tommy need to do something different now, too. Like, you've asked like 3 times for them to be honest with you and tell you what's going on so you can help. They told you to fuck off. Please go fuck off now, Tommy, or just do something different. Because I'm like, this is getting a little old, too. So, yeah, that's... I've grown weary of Tommy. He needs to become important fast. I think... Now that he got into the accident with the invisible truck, he's probably going to become a little bit more interesting going forward. But yeah, another scene of him trying to convince Flynn and Burton to tell him the truth. I'm like, I don't need any more of these. I feel like I'm being hard on this episode than I feel about it. But speaking of scenes I didn't particularly care for, we get another when finally we leave the Bob storyline. And Flynn heads back to future London to confront Wilf about why they continue to, like, narrowly avert death. Like, every time something happens, they end up handling it on their own and they have no warning, even though they're working with people from the future. And I think that's a very good point to make when she, presents him to this, like, I'm supposed to be trusting you, and now we've had multiple attempts on our life, none of which have you warned us about or attempted to help prevent, nothing. And I think that's a very good point to make. And it never even gets addressed in the convo. Like, she doesn't even give him a chance to address that before she goes, I was just wondering if when you had us link up, like, were you trying to, like, manipulate my emotions to make me like you or whatever? And he's like, I don't know what that means. And then he don't even get to fully address that. She don't press him on that. And then she moves on to ask him if it was a mistake to trust him. And I'm just like, I wanted to hear him explain the attempts on your life. I wanted to hear him explain about the link because even though she was using that haptic drift term or whatever that Burton had used to explain, developing feelings during these haptic links, he didn't even, like, he gave that fucking lie about Flynn's peripheral being based on a woman he loved or something like that. And I'm like, that kind of tracks. So, like, I want her to, like, she didn't even mention that. She didn't mention nothing he said in that conversation. She didn't press it. And I'm like, to me, again, these are the kinds of, I think, mistakes that a better show doesn't make. And it's not like a huge mistake or anything like that, but it's like, I don't mind the answers to those questions being delayed. So, like, I want to know why they haven't helped with these attempts on Flynn and Burton's lives. I want to know what is the nature of Wilf and Flynn's relationship. I want to know both of these things. But what I don't understand is why you can't make it so that the plot can allow the questions to not be answered in a way that's satisfactory. Because in this case, a realistic situation would be like, hey, Wilf, you didn't answer my fucking question. I want to know blah, 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 blah. Or even if you don't get to that point, you have the question, say, interrupted by something that happens, like an explosion, or hey, we have to run and something's happening, whatever. Have a natural interruption happen, something like that, if you want to delay that question, but still pose these questions and these thoughts to the audience. But don't pose these thoughts and questions to the audience and then just like change lanes on it immediately without really like finishing it. It's kind of tough to put into words why that feels so unsatisfactory to me, but it's just like, I don't like when characters behave in an unrealistic manner, because if they behaved realistically, it wouldn't work out for the plot. Like, it's like, like I said, the realistic response is for Flynn to actually push him on that and make Wilf answer. Like, why haven't you helped us? Why did I feel like you were manipulating my emotions? And make him answer that. And then, but if you don't want us to know that, if you feel like that's going to interfere with the story you want to tell, have a third party interruption come in. Have Lev come in the room. Have one of the other two come in the room. You can have anything happen that interrupts, but don't have the person who's presenting the very good questions pivot themselves without even getting an answer to their own question. And like that, I don't know, that just kind of irritated me. I don't know. Again, it's like a small thing, but like there's a collection of small things in this episode that just kind of just felt like a better show would have done that. Flynn decides that she wants to put some heat on Charisse. So her and Wilf roll up to the Research Institute, and Flynn goes in there, and her and Charisse talk, and Charisse, I now think, believes that Flynn did not take whatever it is that she thinks that Flynn took. Now, she makes the point, like, you still gotta die, which is a valid point, but I think she no longer believes that Flynn has it, and believes Flynn when she's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Which really, really makes me wonder what the fuck Charisse is looking for, what it is, if Alita has it, what does it do, why does Alita want it, like, whatever this is, I'm super interested in it. And they decide that they're gonna fight because I think Charisse threatened her first, and like, see, she like grabbed her or something like that, and they start fighting. Flynn gets the upper hand, and she kills, not Charisse, I failed to mention that Charisse says that this was a peripheral itself, so she wasn't physically there, she was in a peripheral, but Flynn kills the peripheral, and that's the end of the episode. And this presents now like the fourth thing that I'm kind of not a big fan of here. How does Flynn know how to fight like that? Like, this isn't the Matrix. Like, the Matrix had its own rules, right? And it's like, okay, our world is like a simulation. So since it's kind of computer driven, we can download black belt kung fu master into your personality profile, and now when you enter into the Matrix, you're now a black belt kung fu master, and that tracks. But they've been very clear here, like, all it is a data transmission from Flynn's time to future London. So if Flynn don't have black belt kung fu master already in her data, in her abilities in 2032, I think it's 2032, why does she now have it in 2077? Or is the 2097? Whatever the fuck year it is. It doesn't matter. Why does she have that ability now? Does the Peripheral have the ability to do badass fighting? And if so, it doesn't matter because the show didn't explain that. Like, so it's like, I'm watching her fight and I'm like, has the show explained at any point why she's able to do this? Because this isn't a game. Like, they've established that she's great at VR simulation games and shit like that. But this ain't a game. This is real life. So how does she know how to fight like this? And I could pose the same question of Charisse, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that Charisse would know how to fight. Like, that seems plausible. It doesn't seem plausible with Flynn, and we haven't seen anything to believe that. So the only thing I could take away from that is that it's because they were both in peripherals, and maybe peripherals just have the ability to do that. But one, that's shitty to not even lay that out, let alone explain how or why peripherals would have that ability. But it took me out of the scene, you know, because like I should be sitting there watching like, holy shit, this is fucking happening. And holy shit, score one for Flynn that she killed the Charisse peripheral. Like, that is going to make Charisse feel threatened and feel like unsafe or whatever. I should be walking out of that scene like, holy shit, that was cool. And all I could think about after that scene was, how the fuck can Flynn fight? So, like, those are the kind of things that I feel like this show should have done better. And that's why this episode, even though, like, I enjoyed watching it, like, it was still, like, too many moments where I was like, what is that? I don't know if I buy that. And it's imperative when you're watching a sci-fi show in particular that you don't take me out of it, where I'm like, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't track. Like, you don't want to do that because it's imperative that I am fully immersed in a show like this where everything that you're trying to convey to me relies upon me accepting it as real, even though sci-fi things take place in a world that's not real. That's what makes it the fiction. Like, it's not real. It's not even really plausible at this time, but you as a show have to convince me that it is. So while I'm watching it, I have to be immersed in in this show or this film's reality and I have to believe it. If you constantly are taking me out of that by making me go like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Why would somebody do that? How do you know how to do it? That's where you start fucking up. And like, again, it's not a huge mistake. I enjoy this episode. All of those things are small, but I'm not doing my job. Well, it's a stretch to call it my job, but I'm not doing my job if I just sit here and slob all over this show every week and fail to point out when it does things that make me raise an eyebrow or point a finger or whatever. So I had a few issues here. But I did still enjoy this episode. I do still enjoy this show. I do have a couple quick thoughts before I wrap up, though. I thought the coded conversation between Bob and his daughter was really cool. Like, I didn't get that at first. I'm like, why is he calling somebody about their insurance? And then when they show her face, I'm like, she's not making a face that, like, aligns with being told what he's saying to her. And it wasn't until she called him dad that I pieced it together. But, which feels late. I feel like I should have got it before then. But I still thought that was a cool conversation. And I also thought it was interesting how there's a moment where Burton and Flynn have a conversation with their mom. And the mom kind of, at first she comes off kind of like, okay, now I'm back to normal, so I'm going to start bossing y'all around again. Like, no, they gave you drugs from the future that brought you back from the brink of death. Maybe be a little bit less intrusive. Like, maybe like, just like, hey, I have a suggestion. Like, don't just act like you in charge now. Like, if it wasn't for them, you'd have been dead. So like, chill. But I do think it was interesting how she presented a fresh perspective on how to look at their relationship with future London. And she essentially says, like, think about how little power you have in this arrangement. Like, what happens if you stop doing this? What happens if you stop doing that? And I think that's an important thought to put in their minds, because I think they need to look at the motivations of future London. Like, how is what we are doing, how is the work that we're doing with them benefiting them? And what happens to us if we even though this feels like a partnership, what happens if we no longer abide by it? And I think that's an interesting point for the mother to raise. So, like I said, enjoy this episode. It did have some issues that just kind of irked me a little bit, but I mean, I'm still fully on board on this show. I still can't wait for the final 3 episodes. And I think the final 3 episodes, I think this episode suffered from having such a centralized focus on Bob and not enough on all the cool things that happened in the last 2 episodes that I want to see more on. But, 6, 7, and 8, we should be right back to those sorts of things, and maybe we can incorporate Bob into those as well, and we can finish this season strong, and this can continue to be one of the more enjoyable shows that I'm watching right now. So I'll see you guys next week for episode 6, and until then, peace.